wonder if he heard you.
Daryl, go ahead and start.
Okay. I was just trying to find a gallery mode on my computer. Did not find it. But I would like to call to order the meeting of March 3rd, 2021 of the Taac Committee to order. And I would like to have an approval of the agenda. Going forward.
Jeff Danes here, approval of the
Daryl, you want to do a roll call first?
roll call first,
Oh,
yeah.
let's, sorry about that. Let's do a roll call. Can staff jump in and go down the list with me, and then if you're here, say aye. Is that possible?
Yeah, Daryl, if you want to just call their names. Do you have a list of the names?
I don't. That's why I asked staff if they want to jump in with me.
Do you want me to do it, Daryl?
Yeah, can you do it for me?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Sam Jasmine,
Here.
Christopher Bates,
Present.
Patsy Murphy, Ken Rogers, Ken, you're muted if you're here. Jeffrey Danes,
Jeffrey Danes here.
Daryl Paulson,
Here.
Carrie Sheldon,
Here.
John Clark, Heidi Meyer, Claudia,
Here.
Patty Thorson,
Here.
Diane,
Here.
Eric, Eric, are you muted?
Can you help me here? I think I broke something. I did.
Is that you, John?
Yes. Yes.
Richard.
Here.
Okay, that's it. Go ahead, Daryl.
Okay. And I apologize for that. I did pull up a roster earlier, but I realized it was the wrong one, so I didn't have the current one. Sorry about that. With that, I would like to have approval of the agenda.
Jeff Danes here, motion to approve the agenda.
Sam Jasmine, second.
All right, and with that, the approval of the agenda is
Here.
all in favor. Say aye.
Aye.
We have to do a roll call on that one. Well,
Sorry.
I think that one could just be a voice vote. I think.
Daryl, I was on mute. Carrie Sheldon, aye.
Sam Jasmine, aye.
Patty Thorson, aye.
Claudia, aye.
Richard Rowan, aye.
Eric Hendrickson, aye.
Yes.
Diane Graham Raff, aye.
Oh, sorry.
Chris Danes, aye. Jeff Danes, aye.
I could use the do.
Have those vote? All those have voted or wanted to vote. Have they voted?
John Clark, aye.
Thank you. Okay, And with that, I'd like a motion to approve February 3rd minutes of 2021.
Great, so I move the minutes for done.
Who's
Second.
who moved?
I believe it was Jeff, right?
No,
Carrie
I did,
Sheldon.
Daryl.
Carrie Sheldon seconded.
Seconded? Carrie?
Yes. Yes.
Claudia
Thank you.
moved it. Did you say?
What's that, Daryl?
Okay. So going forward now, we have a presentation by Paul Coates that just got added, and we'd like him to come forward and talk to us.
Thank you.
Hey, Daryl, this is Andy. Can I have just a second before we put Paul on?
Something is really sharp on the ears.
Yeah. All I was going to say, Daryl, is it okay if I just make one comment quick?
Go ahead, Andy. That's fine.
Thanks. I just wanted to call out something Guthrie just put in the chat, and that's that we've got about 10 people unmuted right now, and the feedback and background noise are substantial. If folks who aren't talking could just make it a point to mute their mics, I think that would make for a smoother meeting going forward. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. If we can just take a second or two and let everybody do that, then I'll come back on.
So it looks to me like maybe John might still be unmuted, and other than that,
Well, I hope it's not me.
yep, we can hear you still.
I am muted.
Nope, not yet. We can still hear you.
I see John
You can hear me?
I see
You can
John
hear me?
twice.
I'm playing with the mute. Okay.
Hey, Allison, this is Guthrie. As the meeting host, you can unmute, or you can mute everybody who's not talking.
Thank you.
Okay.
Should be a mute all option.
Oh, there is?
You should be able to mute everybody, Allison, because you're the host.
Okay, I'm looking now.
You can go through the list on the side and mute whoever is not muted. You can click on them and it will mute them.
Okay.
Also, just so people understand what it looks like, if it says unmute on the screen, it means that you are currently muted. If it says mute, it means that we can currently hear you, because what it's telling you is the action that will occur if you click the button.
I'm not muted. Are we ready to go now? Paul Colton, he's the fleet manager for Metro Transit.
Hey, thank you, Daryl. Thanks, everybody. It's great to be here with you this afternoon.
Zoom. And
to bring this information to you this afternoon. Metro Mobility is in the position of replacing 7 Chevy Equinox SUVs. These were purchased in 2016, and we are in following our policy and procedures. They are eligible for replacement. So, Allison, or Jason, can you flip to the next slide? Thank you. So, these vehicles have all reached the end of their 5-year life cycle per Met Council policy. And by the time these are replaced with whatever vehicle we end up selecting, they will have reached a minimum of 175,000 miles, and several will be over 200,000 miles. So we got good life and longevity out of these particular vehicles. Can we go to the next slide, Jason? Thank you. So what should we replace them with? Well, the first option would have been the Ford Flex that we just purchased a little over a year ago. Those are no longer available and manufactured by Ford. So we have to move on. Those have been a great vehicle, and we've had great feedback from folks on those vehicles. We want to keep with a all-wheel drive version of this vehicle. It's been really good for getting through snow and sleet and ice and other bad weather. So we don't want to change that. But one of the things we do want to change is we want to buy a greener vehicle. We want something with better fuel economy and that is going to need less maintenance. And so with the encouragement from the governor's office and his task force, MnDOT, the Pollution Control Agency, and our own Council Thrive policies, Metro Mobility is recommending a gas hybrid SUV option for the 7 vehicle replacements. And we will use the state of Minnesota's contract. So it's already been competitively bid. And that's a big advantage for us that it's already been completed. So the 3 vehicles that are on the state bid that are a hybrid SUV are the 2021 Toyota RAV4, the Ford Escape hybrid, and the Toyota Highlander hybrid. Jason, can you go to the next slide for me? Thank you, sir. So this is just a depiction of those 3 vehicles. The Toyota RAV4, the Ford Escape are in the smaller SUV class, similar to the Equinox, and the Toyota Highlander is in the mid-size class of SUV, similar to our Ford Flex, to give you some perspective on that. And those are just kind of what they look like in white. So what do we do what criteria do we use for selecting a vehicle? Well, it's a pretty long list, and here's a few of them. The most important is customer comfort. Again, these are used when for customers that have a difficult time or can't use our bus. And so we want to make sure it's a very comfortable ride, comfortable seating. We need enough space for the customers when we have multiple customers on board. And then we need storage space that's adequate to be able to handle packages, walkers, and other small mobility devices. And then for the driver, we want to make sure it's a comfortable and a good ergonomic position for the driver. And easy to navigate the controls in the vehicle. And then we want to be sure that we can get our technology installed on board, our cameras, our Ranger computers for scheduling and mapping. It's the little computer the drivers use, our fare collection device, and our router that everything is wired through for communication. Of course, fuel economy is very important. the maintenance schedule is important, and the price of the vehicle. At the end, what we're looking for is what is the best overall value of the vehicle to the council, taking into account price and all of those other features that are best to serve our customers and maintainability of the vehicle. Go ahead, Jace, with the next slide. So on the vehicle comparison, here is just a few of the things that we looked at side by side with these three vehicles. And as I'll point out a few of them, the rear seat headroom is negligible. There's almost no difference in the rear seat headroom, so they're all good. The rear seat hip room, however, does have a significant difference between the Highlander and the RAV4 with the Escape in between. And the Highlander is almost 4 inches more hip room in the back seat than the Escape. And the rear seat legroom in the Highlander is 2 inches, almost 2 inches more than the Escape as well. The cargo volume in the Highlander is more than 20 cubic feet greater than the RAV4 and the Escape. Now, where the other two have a big advantage on the Highlander is that they do have better fuel economy. They do 41 miles per gallon in the RAV4 in the city, and the Escape does 44 miles per gallon in the city. The Highlander is at 35. And the price of the Highlander is a bit more than the Escape and the RAV4, at nearly $11,000 more dollars than the RAV4 and $14,000 more than the Escape. But that is again, we're comparing a mid-size SUV with a small-size SUV in that category. One other thing I did want to note on the Highlander was that it is what was I going to say about that? I don't remember. So we will move on. Go ahead and move on to the next slide. So staff recommendation. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. So staff looked at all three of these vehicles and spent a lot of time with these vehicles, comparing, taking notes, talking with the sales staff, asking questions they couldn't answer, and they would have to come back to us. And so I believe we did a really thorough job of examining these vehicles. And in the end, staff was unanimous in that the Toyota Highlander is the best option for our customers and for the council. So if we were to go out for an RFP and we had bids on all three of those vehicles, we would have selected the Toyota Highlander, even though it's more expensive. And here's why. It has the most interior room, storage room, easy to install technology. The Highlander is manufactured in Princeton, Indiana, so we know that the vehicle is American made by American workers. It gets excellent fuel economy. We'll double the fuel economy of our Ford Flex in town. It has an excellent safety record with a 5-star crash test rating from the Insurance Institute. And the additional cost of the vehicle purchase can be recovered in the fuel savings over the life of the vehicle if we compared it to the cost of the Ford Flex and its fuel economy. So, so by having it be a hybrid and a better fuel economy, those fuel savings over time add up to real savings in operating costs. The other great part about the Highlander is it's available in 45 to 60 days from the time we order it, which we could place an order as early as next week. This has already been in our capital budget and ready to go. And we wanted to make sure we came to Taac for your questions and feedback on this. So I don't think I have another slide. Do I, Jason? I don't. So at this point, I would be glad to open it up for your questions and comments as we go through this process.
Sam Jasmine.
Yes.
Go ahead, Sam. Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Hey, this is Guthrie again. So John Clark is logged in twice. I can see his screen twice, and there's one of them that is muted, and the other one is unmuted, and that's
Oh
the
my
feedback that we're
God.
hearing. You want to,
It's always me
or
haunting.
Allison, if you can go to that second,
Right, and expel
log in
them.
and mute. There you go. Thank you.
This is Eric Hendrickson. Sam, did you have a question? I have a question as well. I was just waiting to see if you we're just waiting for the feedback to stop.
Go ahead if you can now.
All right. Yes, I have two questions actually. Comparatively to the SUV, the car that is being driven now, how much legroom is in the front? And I presume that there's nothing that goes into the back to divide the seats in the back, like no cup holder thing or anything like that.
The front leg room is equal to or greater than the current vehicle. We're replacing the Chevy Equinox. So 41 inches of front, I believe it's 41 inches of front leg room.
And there's nothing that extends into the back. You know how sometimes you see the extenders that go back to divide the floor space.
Right. Yes. So it is mostly a flat floor in the rear.
Okay.
Yep. And the console between the driver's seat and the passenger seat in the front does not extend too far into the back.
Okay. All right. Well, those were my questions. As you, I thank people for being considerate of the space because, as you know, that many of us have guide dogs and we have to fit them in somewhere plus our legs. So.
Absolutely, and that was one of the things that we talked about as we were comparing the Toyota RAV4 and the Highlander side by side, is that we agreed that there's just it's too tight in the RAV4, and ultimately the Escape had the same feel. It was too tight, and so we wanted to maximize as much space as we could for customers and their service animals.
Thank you, and thank you for presenting today.
You're welcome.
This is John. I'll try to talk fast. How about reliability? That was my choice was the Highlander, but I was wondering about reliability.
Yes, the Highlander has a great track record for reliability. They've been manufacturing the hybrid version for a number of years now. I can't remember how many in a row, but it's 5 or 6 years. And battery life at a minimum is expected to go 150,000 miles, and most likely much longer than that. The maintenance schedule is oil changes are every 10,000 miles. So I think that's an EPA regulation now for auto manufacturers, but it's got a really good maintenance schedule, and we're expecting these to go very easily 5 years.
Great. The second thing is, so you're replacing it with 7 vehicles. Is there any thought or advantage to buying the cheaper model and getting a couple of more vehicles?
Well, great question. We have talked about that in the past before, of splitting our fleet up among different vehicles. And the challenges for our contractors is that now they've got to carry additional parts, find additional parts for the different portions of the fleet, which isn't, our concern so much, but I am aware of that. I am aware of that issue on the maintenance side. The second thing with this particular purchases is that based on staff feedback and review, we are very confident that folks would be very disappointed if we were to purchase the Ford Escape based on the size within the interior of that vehicle. And one of the things that we all agreed is we do not want to take a step back in terms of the accommodations that we can provide with our sedan fleet.
And
my sense is that this represents a step forward over the Chevy Equinox.
It is. It's on par with the Ford Flex, and that's kind of what some of our thought process was.
Thank you for that.
and this is Ken. I've got a question.
Go ahead, Ken.
So in terms of the hybrid and the electrical part of it, how often will it need to be recharged, and are we going to be able to get the most benefit out of the hybrid part of it because of the amount of use that these vehicles require? In other words, how much of the gas savings are we going to get based on how often it needs to be recharged?
Ken, that's a fantastic question, and thank you for asking that. So these are not a plug-in hybrid. These are a gas hybrid. So the electrical system is recharged through regenerative braking. And then, yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome.
This is Eric Henriksen. I just have a quick question. It seems that the Highlander won out because of the size and the spacing of it, not the cost. So why not compare competitors when it comes to size? Why not just look at all mid-size SUVs if that's the case? Because cost-wise, it's from the closest ones, I think it's like 33% higher in cost. So why not just look at all mid-size?
Right. Thank you, Eric, for that question. I would love to look at more mid-size SUVs for replacement. Unfortunately, on the state contract, the Highlander was the only mid-size hybrid SUV on the state contract at the present time. I expect that to change. I expect that to change down the road. By the time we replace the Ford Flexes, I think we'll have a lot more options, not just in the hybrid market, but in the electrical vehicle market in the mid-size SUV.
Well, again, thank you. We've had 4 questions. I mean, anybody have any more burning, pressing questions for Paul that can't we take offline or have to be answered right now? You can speak now or talk to him later.
This is Carrie Sheldon. I'm just
floor plan is likely not to change significantly.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you to all for those questions. Paul, thank you for.
Really
Sure, go
quickly,
ahead.
Carol?
Go ahead, yes.
I just wanted to say one thing for people who have braces. I just want to make sure that they're not, I don't know how the vehicles are going to be set up because I've been in some of them in the past. Can they move the seat back? Because I know sometimes big people have to sit in the front, but I need enough room to get in and get out. And will I be able to shut the door, or will they be able to do it? Or will I be able to open up the doors correctly? So I just wanted you guys to look into that, because I don't know if the seats can slide back, where you want me to sit.
Oh, I can hear
to be on the safe side.
Right, and that's more of an operational issue, Heidi, but the drivers should be able to adjust for sure the front passenger seat to accommodate your seating position.
So are you going to bring that up to the operating people, the people when you send them vehicles? The drivers don't always listen to us or listen to the rules. So those vehicles sometimes get used for things that you wouldn't believe, some of the things I've seen. So how can we make sure that people who have braces and certain mobility devices, they can get into the back seat properly, so I don't have to report it?
I will bring that up with the operations staff.
That would be awesome, because there needs to be some teaching.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is Diane Graham-Raff. I have just one really quick question. It's kind of a takeoff from Heidi's, and that has to do with the seat height. Are there any issues with this one being a little higher where people may have trouble, getting in or out? And do you have any like step stools or other things if that is an issue?
Hey, Diane, that is a great question. And yes, we have addressed that because these are a little bit higher off the ground. All three units were about the same at about between 18 and 19 inches off the ground. And so we will continue to use the availability of either a safe step stool, or we are exploring the potential of a running board type of a step that would be safe to use as a step into the vehicle. And so one way or another, we will have that piece of equipment to assist customers.
You need to think about winter. This is Heidi, not to interrupt, but she makes a really good point. And because they don't always park in safe places. And I recently had a driver who doesn't know how to back up. And I've never heard so many beeps in my entire life. I was getting tired of him backing up to properly do anything correctly. So I'm concerned about winter, and I'm concerned about our climate. So you need to make it as safe as possible.
I will share that with operations staff, Heidi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heidi, and thank you, Diane, to your comment. And sorry about that. But what I would say is, any further questions about the purchase of these 7 vehicles, and we had an opportunity to see them if we wanted to. I don't. Did that event occur, or was it still occurring, Paul?
Daryl, yes, we had those events as Allison sent those meeting notices out. David Fenley was able to attend our viewing of the Ford Escape. And we were able to have a really good discussion with him about the comparisons with the other vehicles as well, based on our experience. So, yep.
Well, I'm just wondering, John, how many passengers do they hold? Excluding, of course, the running board.
Yeah. Well, for sure, two adult customers can fit very comfortably in the rear seat of the Highlander, and depending on the contractor's policy regarding the front seat passenger, that is also a potential space.
Again, thank you, John, and thank you to everyone who has weighed in on this. it seems like that's a hot issue for this committee. And I thank David for coming out there and attending that event for us. I'd like to get us back on track, and any other questions that you have relating to this could be taken offline.
Hey, what's up?
If Paul has anything else,
I'm doing the meeting, but I got a second possibly.
go ahead.
Oh,
Jason, you're not muted.
What was that? Jason that tried to chime in? Who was chiming in?
I think Jason was just unmuted for a second, didn't realize it.
Okay.
I want to thank the committee for your great questions, and thank you, Daryl. I hope you guys have a great day, and if you have any additional questions, you can send emails to Allison, who will get those to me, or you can email me directly if you've got my email as well. So one way or another, I will get that feedback.
Thank you, Paul. And I mean, is there any other feedback that we can give you right? I mean, within the next 30 seconds.
I think you guys have given me plenty of additional thoughts to chew on this, and again, based on what you guys are asking, I think we're making the right choice.
Okay, thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Taac. Appreciate it. Bye bye.
Thanks. And then just so that we can get through our agenda, because we do have about 3 or 4 presentations. We have 2 other presentations, and then we have a legislative update that I would like to hear about as well. And then we have subcommittee reports. So I'm going to ask that we hold questions for these next 2 reports. We'll hold them till the end so they can get through their reports, and then we can maybe take 1 or 2 questions, and then take most of those questions offline, unless it's really important and really necessary. Okay? Does everybody agree or not?
Everybody's muted, so let me just go ahead.
All right.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. Well, let's just start out, see where we get. So the next we have a report on the Beeline BRT, and that's going to be given to us by Cody Olsen, coordinator, and Adam Smith, the senior coordinator. Take it away, folks.
Great, thank you so much, Daryl. Really appreciate the opportunity to present to the Taac today. I'm a senior planner in the BRT projects office. My name is Adam Smith. And as Daryl mentioned, I'm joined today by Cody Olsen, and we'll be kind of going back and forth a little bit throughout this presentation, but looking forward to giving this update and dealing with the questions we can today, and certainly, receiving other questions offline. Jason, if you'd go ahead and advance to the next slide. Thank you. So just to provide a quick overview of the Beeline Bus Rapid Transit project for folks who may not be familiar, this is bringing bus rapid transit to the Lake Street and Marshall and Selby corridors in Minneapolis and St. Paul. It's planned to be the 4th arterial bus rapid transit line in our region, and it represents the substantial replacement of the Route 21, which has been historically our region's 2nd highest ridership bus route, but has been the route that has the slowest in-service speed. Service with the Beeline would be about every 10 minutes most of the day and 7 days a week. And one of the big project goals is faster, more reliable service. So we're shooting for approximately 20% improved travel times for transit users compared to existing conditions in the Route 21 corridor. The project is fully funded at this point, and we are targeting opening in 2024. And so we're looking forward to sharing more details now as the draft corridor plan is rolling out. And I've got a corridor plan, or a corridor map, excuse me, here that I'll talk to a little bit more in detail later in the presentation. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, Jason. So in terms of background in the planning efforts for this project, we really started planning in 2019. Originally, the Beeline was only intended to go as far east as Snelling and University in St. Paul, but we heard from a number of stakeholders very early in this process that an extension to downtown St. Paul and specifically to Union Depot was something that was of significant interest. And so it's something that we took a look at very early, and in November 2019 did make the recommendation to extend the Beeline to downtown St. Paul along Selby Avenue, and to route the Beeline along Marshall, Snelling, and Selby Avenues in that area of St. Paul. So no longer crossing I-94 as Route 21 does today, but rather taking sort of a more direct east-west routing. At that point in late 2019, we identified 33 preliminary station locations where the Beeline would stop along the corridor. And we also included some very preliminary information about an overall bus service plan. So, starting to look at the mix of local service along with the BRT service in the corridor. And again, just a couple of maps to help sort of detail the evolution of the plans as we've moved through these previous steps in the process. I can go ahead to the next slide, please. And at this point, I will pass it over to Cody to summarize some of what we heard after that initial community engagement that we did based on the corridor recommendations.
Thank you, Adam. Hello, everyone. My name is Cody Olsen, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator for the Metro Beeline. And so I wanted to give a little bit of background and history on some of the community engagement that's been completed as part of this project. A lot of the images on this page is showing a number of different areas that we engaged in person as part of this project are from 2019, when the majority of our planning engagement happened. And so the goal of our engagement process was to really get feedback on the first planning questions that we had around the extension to downtown St. Paul, around the route that the bus would take when it reached Snelling Avenue. Those main questions. And then later on, we worked hard to determine the actual intersections that the Beeline would stop at. The types of activities that we were able to connect with community members at included open house meetings, pop-ups at bus stops, ride-alongs, meetings with neighborhood groups, office hours at different businesses in the community, door knocking different properties, and a lot of larger community events that were happening in 2019. During this engagement phase, we heard a lot of significant feedback related to the travel time of the buses, the frequency and the reliability. Those were things that people really cared about and really wanted to see improvements on for the Route 21 and for the future Beeline to assist with. Unsurprisingly, we heard a lot of feedback supporting a alignment that went to downtown St. Paul, and the feedback was a bit more mixed around the actual route. The majority of our even open houses favored an alignment that remained south of I-94, but the majority of the feedback that we did directly in Midway and along Selby Avenues indicated a preference for an alignment directly serving Midway. And we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, thanks, Cody. And so, part of the next steps that we took was to take that feedback from the corridor recommendations and continue working with our agency partners to develop a draft Beeline corridor plan, which is what we released to the public on February 22nd and are currently receiving comments. And again, the main focus of this plan is really to identify the intersections where stations would be located along the corridor, and then to identify which corner of each intersection would have a platform. So that's really the level of detail we're at this point, and the main goal of the draft corridor plan and our planning process is really to solidify those platform locations. So I did want to just kind of go through the corridor west to east, just to ensure that everyone is aware of the locations we are talking about. So first in Minneapolis, along Lake Street, we're planning stations at the West Lake Street station of the planned Green Line extension, and then at Dean and West Bedeh-Makaska Parkway, Lake and Lagoon at East Bedeh-Makaska Parkway, Lake and Lagoon at Hennepin, then along Lake Street at Lyndale, Nicollet, 35W, 4th and 5th Avenue, Chicago, Bloomington, Cedar, Lake Street Midtown Station with a connection to the Blue Line there, Minnehaha, 31st Avenue, 36th Avenue, and 44th Avenue. And then crossing into St. Paul on Marshall Avenue, stations planned at Otis, Cretin, Cleveland, Fairview, and then the Beeline buses would turn onto Snelling and use the existing Snelling and Dayton station on the A line before continuing along Selby Avenue with stations at Hamlin, Lexington, Victoria, Dale, and Western. At that point, there'd be a station at John Ireland and Marshall before the Beeline would continue into downtown St. Paul and excuse me, share station locations with the planned Gold Line on 5th and 6th Streets in downtown St. Paul before ending at Union Depot. So again, it's these station locations and the more detailed platform locations that is the main focus of the draft corridor plan, but we're also providing some additional things for context, including a refined bus service plan. So taking an updated look at that local and limited stop bus service within and along this corridor, as well as an early look at some potential bus priority treatments, which are different mechanisms that will help us meet the speed and reliability goals for the project. Go ahead and next slide, please, Jason. Great. So again, in terms of looking at the station and platform locations, we really went through in a site-by-site basis with our agency partners and proposed platform locations based on a wide range of different considerations at each location. I will note that the plan excludes locations where platforms have been finalized, or the location of platforms have been finalized as part of other projects. But I'll note too that the concept of designs that are shown in the plan will continue to evolve through coordination and engineering. So again, we're not at the detailed design step quite yet with this. It's really about identifying which quadrant of each intersections should host a platform. And so I've got a couple of graphics here just showing an example at Lake and 36th Avenue. On the left is the existing conditions where there are existing bus stops in the southwest and northeast quadrants of the intersection. And then on the right are proposed Lake and 36th station plan concept that shows planned BRT platforms in the southeast and northwest corners of the intersection. So moving from what we call a near side stop to a far side stop in that location. And this is just an example, again, of sort of the level of detail that is included in the plan. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, some of the additional information in the plan includes the refined concept bus service plan. So again, in addition to Beeline service, which would run every 10 minutes, 7 days a week during the day and most of the evening, We're also looking at retaining local service on Route 21 every 30 minutes between Hennepin Avenue and Minnehaha Avenue, really sort of the highest ridership portion of Lake Street. And then we're also looking at adding local service on a new route termed Route 60, which would run every 30 minutes along Selby Avenue and connect to the Midway area of St. Paul directly. So one of the things that we heard in that earlier stage of engagement is the importance of that connection between Selby and Midway. And so this is part of looking to address that need while retaining overall Beeline needs as well. Again, these conceptual service plans will continue to be further developed and refined as the Beeline nears opening, and we'll also be taking a closer look at Route 53 service as the Beeline approaches implementation as well, as that provides or has in the past provided limited stop service along a large portion of this corridor, but as with other express routes has been suspended during a great portion of the pandemic. So again, just a sort of a different corridor map shown on this slide, highlighting where those portions of local service would be provided based on what we have in the concept plan at this point. Next slide, please. And I will hand it back over to Cody.
Thanks, Adam. One of the questions that we often get and want to answer is how people are going to participate in reviewing and evaluating this draft corridor plan. And so, especially in this current climate, the engagement around this plan will be primarily digital due to COVID-19. The types of events that I had mentioned earlier are things that we just can't do under the current situation. And so really people will be directed towards the project website where they can choose which elements of the plan they'd like to engage on. Once you get to the website, we really try and identify what people might be interested in, whether they're interested in a specific station or in the plan as a whole or in certain elements of the plan like the service. People are able to choose the parts of the plan that they'd like to engage on and tell us their thoughts on what we've proposed. As part of this phase, those results will be collected and evaluated and then redistributed as part of a recommended corridor plan, which will have its own set of engagement before we finalize that into a plan that we would take before the council to solidify those corners of the intersections as part of this plan. And on this page, I've just got an example, photo example of what the website interface looks like as you enter onto the Beeline webpage and look towards the Beeline corridor plan. Next slide, please. So where will our outreach efforts be focused? We're trying to get the word out about this in a number of different ways. We're doing this through media communications, whether it's our own council communications, like social media, Connect, Insights, The Wire, Riders Club. We're also sending out project newsletter and rider alerts. We've been able to get some coverage from local media on this plan as well. And so we're relying on a lot of our local media partners to share this information with us. We're also communicating with neighborhood community groups, advocacy groups, project partners like Minneapolis and St. Paul, Hennepin and Ramsey County. And we're also communicating with riders at the stop by using some flyers that were developed and those to non-transit items like light poles near all Route 21. And we are doing a bit of limited in-person surveying, particularly in kind of high traffic areas as safety and COVID-19 guidelines allow. And on this page is an example of the type of flyer that you'll see out at the stop. It's also very similar to a physical postcard that was mailed out to addresses within a certain radius of the current Route 21 today. Next slide, please.
Great, thanks, Cody. And then just a kind of next steps in terms of our project schedule. So again, we've distributed the draft corridor plan and are currently seeking feedback on that. As Cody mentioned, updates from what we hear from folks will be included into a recommended corridor plan later this spring. And then we'll bring a final version of the plan to the Metropolitan Council for formal adoption in early fall of this year, September 2021. And at that point, we'll really sort of be getting into the more detailed design and engineering phase, which we would expect to last through the end of this year and into late 2022. And then looking to begin construction in 2023 and going into 2024. Next slide. So those are the updates we have for you today, and we have Cody and my email addresses available there along with the project website, but happy to take questions from the group now. Thanks.
This is Ken. I have a question.
Go ahead, Ken.
Can you tell me, is there a difference between routes that start with a letter like route or line A and line B versus the color lines? Or is it just a way to confuse consumers?
Generally speaking, not generally speaking, but yes, the letter lines are what we call arterial bus rapid transit. So they're really more focused on sort of running on arterial streets versus the color lines, which are more sort of highway-based BRT. So there's certainly some overlap in terms of types of service, but the arterial BRT, in terms of A line, C line, D line that you hear about, those are really focused on that the arterial BRT service, which includes consistent types of stations, consistent station spacing, and has some of those things more in common.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
Ken, I believe it means also the arterial lines versus the colored lines that you're talking about. I believe that also has to do with whether or not it runs mostly in its own dedicated lane, and if it runs in its own dedicated space, I think that has a little bit to do with it as well.
This is John. Just three things quick. First, does with the rerouting, does this stop at CHS Field baseball pan on the cheap, and the Twins are, the Saints are the new AAA affiliate. So that's one question. The second, and this is really good as well, going to Union Depot is a seamless process for people who have trouble with transportation. And I understand that they're going to add a second Amtrak to Chicago with the possibility of a line to Duluth. And third, I used to ride 21A way back in the day, and it had a reputation of crime, and I'm just wondering if that's also a concern with this line. But take those questions. And thank you for your good work.
Yes.
Thank
So
you both. I don't know if we have time to answer those two questions right now, but I mean.
Well, don't take a second. Does it stop at CHS Field?
The closest stops would be Sibley or Wakuta and 4th, and then Union Depot itself. So
Yeah,
those would be
so-
the closest.
And those are actually the two questions that are more important to me. Thanks.
Great. Anything else? Otherwise, I'd like to move on to, we have a report about the better bus route, number 3, actually. And I was wondering if we could go on to that. Unless Cody or Adam have anything else to add, I would like to move forward.
Nothing else to add. If anybody has questions, we are our contact information should be as part of the presentation, and then you can contact us or you can contact through Allison, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that come up as part of this process. Thank you for having us.
So they're not answering any more questions, Daryl?
But go ahead, Heidi. I'll let you sneak in one
My
more.
question is, when I was downtown Minneapolis using the city buses, I noticed that in Minneapolis they have like an A side and another A side and a B side, and I had to ask somebody, which side do I stand on? So just make sure when you do these labeling that we really understand where we're supposed to stand and what vehicles we're supposed to be on and what buses are what and where. Just because I had to learn and I had to ask questions, because the buses come in one way and they come out the other way. So I was learning how that all was. So for people who have processing and learning disability or brain injury stuff need to, we need it as simple as possible, not too complicated. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Anyone else have a burning thought that must get on the table right now? I mean, if not, I'd like to thank Adam and Cody for their gracious time to our committee and always willing to come and update us on BRT. I do have one question, and it's short. This BRT project is in line with the 10 projects that were originally proposed a couple years ago during the governor's first part of his administration. Am I mistaken or am I right? If one of you can answer
This was one of the projects that was identified in the governor's bonding bill over the last year plus, and so that is one of the reasons why the project is fully funded along with the D line now. So this has been a line that's been identified as a priority in the last few years.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you. And seeing no further questions, I would like to move on to Michael, and I can't pronounce your last name, but I'm going to say Munzenberg. Is that close?
It's a worthy effort. Mechtenberg.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, well, great. Thank you, Daryl. I'll just jump right in. I know we're a little behind schedule, and I've got 20 slides, so maybe this was a little ambitious. So I will try to clip through them at a little bit more, maybe a little brisker pace than I would otherwise. But yeah, my name is Michael Mechtenberg, Program Manager at Metro Transit, and been working for the last couple of years on projects that improve the speed and reliability of service. Next slide. So, in short, our current project is focused on Route 3. These are the outcomes. The desired outcomes are to improve the speed and reliability of service, improve accessibility at bus stops, and then in turn, improving customer and operator satisfaction as part of the process. Next slide. So before I dig too far into Route 3, I do just want to give a brief overview of this new program that we're working on called Better Bus Routes. Essentially, it's our way to it's another way to invest in local bus service. Our goal is to really focus on these lower cost, common sense improvements, stuff that we can turn around a little bit faster. So improvements that might be smaller scale, but we can do more quickly. We started with Route 2. That was the pilot project back in 2018. We more recently made changes on Route 63. That was last fall. And then Route 3 is our third route as part of this program. And our goal is to do a new route every few years, or every 1 to 2 years. I think if we can hit our stride here, it can be every year. And then down there at the bottom, our website. If I don't get to your question today, or if you want more information, there's the website you can go to for more info. Next slide. So what you're looking at here, this is kind of a busy slide. I think the shortest way to summarize what you're seeing here is take everything that Adam and Cody are doing with BRT and sort of simplify that. So shrink it down. We are looking at many of the same things that they're looking at: service frequency, shelters, or facilities for passengers, signal priority to make buses go faster, improved accessibility, and simplifying the route design. I would say, again, we're doing everything that they're doing, but on a smaller scale, lower cost, faster turnaround. This program often gets confused with BRT. So I think that's probably the quickest way to describe it. Next slide. So I'm going to spend just a couple minutes talking about some of the strategies that we use as part of this Better Bus Route program. Again, the goals are to improve the speed and reliability of service, customer facilities. One of the strategies that we use is stop consolidation. So in our region, our regional guidelines say that local stops should be between every 1/8 of a mile and every 1/4 mile. And in many areas, it's actually less than or closer than every 1/8 of a mile. And so this program is saying, well, let's widen those out just a little bit to no more than a 1/4 mile apart. Now, in many areas and more dense areas, we're retaining that 1/8 of a mile spacing, but there will be certain stretches where that's extended a 1/4 mile. Again, just for a sense of perspective, with BRT, those stations are planned about every 1/2 mile. So you can see there in the graphic, this is really a hybrid between your typical local route spacing and the Metro BRT program. We often get asked, well, how do you decide which stops to move or to replace? This is a list of a few of the considerations. What is the stop spacing today? What does ridership look like at those stops? How is that stop used? Is it a transfer point to other service? What are the adjacent land uses? Is there a library nearby, a drugstore, a senior building, a school? And then looking at the limited mobility boardings at these stops. Those are probably the top 5, but I do want people to know that the project team really talks through every single stop. So there are other considerations. These are the top 5, but again, we do go through it stop by stop when we're making our recommendations. Next slide. Another strategy here is improving accessibility. This is an example of a new ADA pad installed on Route 623 last summer. Our goal is to make sure that every stop is ADA accessible. Seems like a pretty straightforward goal. It seems like one that we should be meeting already. We are not. And so as part of this process, we do an audit of all the bus stops. We go out there, we take measurements, we look at the slope, we look at the width and the depth of each one, and we will fix those that are not accessible today. Next slide. Another strategy is improving the facilities. So these are not BRT stations, but they are transit shelters. I think if you're out there in the snow or the rain, anything would be better than nothing. And these transit shelters, I think, are a major improvement. for many of our riders. So our goal as part of this is to have a shelter placed at each stop that meets the boarding requirements. So we're not saying a shelter would be at all stops. That is not possible today. But we do want to make sure that when we go through the ridership and the anticipated ridership, that we're placing stops where they should be placed, where they probably should already be placed, but they're not. As part of stop consolidation, another benefit is that often means that there are more riders boarding at any single stop. And so that gives us the ability to actually add more shelters over and above what we might already see out there on the route. Next slide. Finally, route simplification. You know, our goal is to really make routes and schedules as easy to understand as possible. So we do that by either reducing or eliminating the number of branches, and reducing or eliminating what are called short line trips. So trips that don't all go to the final terminal. I can show you some examples here on Route 3, but there are a lot of different variations in the route. There are different branches. There are different areas on the route where trips end, and it really creates a lot of confusion for customers. The schedule is extremely confusing. The routing is also, frankly, kind of confusing. And so I think Route 3 is a perfect example of one where we can make some substantial improvements to really clean it up, frankly, to simplify it and make it easier for customers to understand. Next slide. And then here are some other strategies that we consider for each route. I don't know if Adam mentioned it, but transit signal priority. It's a way for the bus to communicate with the signaling system to make it through intersections faster, increasing or changing the frequency of a route, and then looking for opportunities for other transit advantages. They might be bus lanes. They might be, curb extensions so that the bus doesn't have to pull out of the lane of traffic to stop. They might be queue jumps or other things like that. So there's a whole host of these other transit advantages that we look at for each of these routes. Next slide. So why Route 3? Well, pre-pandemic, it had very strong ridership. It was one of our busiest routes, the 6th busiest in our network. So obviously, we want to make changes that benefit a lot of riders. As I've already said, it's really the poster child for an extremely complicated route alignment and schedule. So certainly that's our goal, to simplify that. We had occasionally, not often, but we had occasionally received complaints about frequent stop spacing on the 3 specifically. And it had not, as of last year, at that point, been identified for BRT improvements. So as you may know, with the Network Next project and assessment, it is now this Como, Maryland line is in actually the top tier of future BRT corridors. So I think this is just the first improvement that we'll be seeing on the 3 here in the next 5 or 10 years. So that's great news. And I just want to reiterate that the changes that we're making today are completely consistent with the principles of BRT planning and programming. So, again, thinking about streamlining the route, simplifying the schedule, improving accessibility and others. So we'll be working with the BRT planner that will be taking this route over for a very clean pass off of what we've learned and what we've experienced during this planning to what he should expect as he starts looking at this for the future H line. Next slide. So this is a map of what the route looks like today. I don't know if there are any Route 3 riders as part of this group, but what you'll see on this map is a very complicated route. It has
Route 3, just so you know.
Map of Route 3, that's correct.
Them and the state fair.
Yep. Yeah, so it has a lot of different destinations. It serves both downtowns, serves the U of M. It travels along Como Avenue. It has a lot of different uses, actually. This is one of those routes where there's not like a single point where everybody's trying to get to. There are many different destinations along the way, but in turn, it's also a fairly complicated route. So you see this Elm-Kasota branch that just has a few trips today. That's adding a different route variant. You've got a branch on Energy Park Drive and then one on Maryland, adds a little confusion. And then you have a lot of these, again, what are called short lines, where the trip ends, especially going the eastbound direction before downtown St. Paul. So we have certain trips ending at Como and Eustis. We have certain trips ending at Energy Park Drive. We have some ending and beginning at Como and Cleveland. So there's all these different schedule variations that, not to repeat myself, but really do add some needless complexity to the schedule. So this is what the map looks like today. And I'll talk about maybe some of the changes that you'll see as part of this project. So next slide. So I would say there are maybe these 4 things that are the most notable changes that we're proposing. I already mentioned that there's going to be some bus stop consolidation. We are planning a new route alignment through downtown Minneapolis. So it currently operates on 3rd and 4th Streets in downtown, and we are proposing that it operates through downtown on Washington Avenue. So that's a change. As part of that realignment, we are also proposing that Route 3 is extended to serve the North Loop neighborhood, just west of downtown. So that would be a significant increase in service for North Loop residents. And then finally, we're proposing to replace that, it's called the Elm-Kasota branch. It's pretty limited trips there with a separate route. And the thinking here is, again, that schedule simplification and more service can be done on Como Avenue, where most of the riders are. Excuse me, so next slide. So the map you're seeing here, I don't want to go in too much detail. This is a map of the proposed bus stop changes and alignment change through downtown Minneapolis. I'd be happy to answer specific questions maybe at the end here if you have questions about a specific stop. I guess I would just reiterate, if you're able to see the downtown Minneapolis alignment, again, I mentioned we're proposing that it operate on Washington, that extension to the North Loop, and then just the general bus stop changes. Next slide. Here's the other end of the route. It's a very long route, so we have to break this up into 2 different maps to get to really this level of detail. Very similar types of recommendations over here in terms of the stop consolidation. No changes to routing in downtown St. Paul. Next slide. I think I've received this question about why we would reroute it via Washington Avenue. So what's shown here is a map of the downtown east neighborhood. And this area has changed dramatically since I've been living here. I moved here in 2003, and this was all essentially just surface parking lots. In the last 15 years or so, this area has really been transformed. There is new housing here. There's new parks. There's businesses and office towers. And this is a renewal that is really continuing through today. So one of the ideas here is that, other than light rail, we have a stop there at the stadium. We, Metro Transit, haven't really responded to this dramatic change in land use. And so I think a more service on Washington here is totally warranted. Next slide. And similarly, this is an aerial map of the North Loop neighborhood, identifying parcels that have been redeveloped over the years. North Loop had certainly a jump start on that redevelopment relative to downtown east. But even since 2004, when it was already in full swing. There's even since then it's just continued to grow and to develop. In this area in particular, we're serving it with some routes today, the 14 and the 7, but compared to the population and the employment in this area, it is woefully underserved. So having that Route 3 extension out here to North Loop, I think is a no-brainer, and I'm really excited to do that. Next slide. Just kind of wrap things up. The proposed Kasota circulator, this is going to affect a fairly modest number of riders. The Kasota branch really serves employment. There's some sort of light industrial areas back here. We are not cutting those people off. They will continue to be served. What we're proposing is a standalone circulator route that, frankly, I think will do a better job of serving their needs. That could be more tailored to the specific work times that they have. It's going to connect with the Green Line, and then it also allows more trips on the 3 to then travel on Como Avenue north of the U of M. Really, Como, that stretch of Como is a very busy area, so we've got a lot of riders there. Next slide. So what's shown here is the project timeline. We had started this about, let's see, maybe not quite a year ago. We started the initial planning. The project team includes staff from St. Paul and Minneapolis and Ramsey County and Hennepin County and others. We really walked through a lot of our stop recommendations, ADA stuff, all of this stuff that happened over the summer. We have the plan out there. We're actually currently in public engagement. If you want to advance one more click. So right now we're in Q1 of 2021, and we're in the final week of public engagement. So we've definitely heard from a lot of people already, and there's a survey that's out there. I haven't seen the results yet, but that'll conclude here in another week or so. So moving forward from that, we're going to take those survey results, update the plan, and then you can see on the what's shown here is in Q3 in August is when we're going to be implementing the changes. So I think there's one more slide. Maybe this is repeating myself a little bit, but public input ends on March 12th. So at that point, I know there's going to be a lot of feedback to get through. We've got, I think, close to 700 survey responses already. So really a tremendous level of feedback. Update the plan based on that feedback. And then really for me, some of the big next steps are going to be coordinating with the city and county on implementing these changes, getting those signs up or taken down. That's a big effort that we rely on city staff for in particular. In early August, we'll start doing outreach for our riders, let them know that these changes are coming. Here's the new schedule, here's the new alignment. And then again, on August 21st would be the implementation date. And that's, again, August 21st of this year. So, okay, and with that, sorry I had to kind of breeze through that, but I think there's one more slide with just my contact info. I'm happy to take questions, so let me know.
Thank you, Michael. In the interest of time, we will take maybe one or two questions, and then the rest of the questions will have to be taken offline.
Absolutely.
Unless we can forgo our subcommittee reports if unless somebody has a subcommittee report or a report that they would like to give. And I know most of everybody's on mute, so I guess unless I see any objection or hear somebody or see them raising their hand or something.
Move on.
Can I say something, Daryl?
I'm gonna try to move on.
I just wanted to ask the question about if the Green Line is dead, not working that day, can I still use the 3 bus to go to the U of M?
you know, the way it's going to be set up still.
Absolutely, yeah. The U of M is really the main destination here on Route 3. So we are absolutely still going to continue serving the U of M. You know, there are occasionally days where the Green Line's not operating. We do typically offer a bus bridge at that time, but the Route 3 is an alternate to you as well.
Okay. Thank you, Michael, for your time and effort, and
Okay.
thank you for that extensive report about the Route 3. I mean, we're all going to use it hopefully to get close to the state fair if we can this year. So
Absolutely.
fingers crossed. Still, I mean, things are moving forward. And thank
All
you.
right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to present.
You bet. Thank you. And with that, I would like to introduce Brooke Orson, the senior project coordinator, governmental affairs committee. Right, I believe is your boss, Jed, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct, Jed Shetton, the Director of Government Affairs.
Great. Well, thank you, Brooke, and welcome to the committee. And I hope that whatever we can't get through today, I hope that we can have you or a member of your staff as a standing part of our committee, at least through the legislative session, so that we can stay on top of things with you.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, again, my name is Brooke Bortson. I'm in the Council's Government Affairs Department. Thank you for making time on your agenda for me today. Mr. Chair, as you alluded to, sort of things change so quickly at the legislature. You know, I didn't even want to put anything down on a PowerPoint because, you know, yesterday to today, everything would be different. So I know a lot of you are familiar with the state legislature. We are just into the second, or we're 2 months into the 2021 session now. So I will just back up to do a really high level overview of the goals of this session and what has to be accomplished, and then get into some more specifics related to issues that the council is working on. So, as you know, in the 2020 election, all of the state legislative seats were on the ballot. After the election, the DFL retained the majority in the House. The Republicans retained the majority in the Senate. So we're one of the only states in the country that has a divided legislature. And apparently in Minnesota, we like that because we keep doing that. The specific to 2021, it's a very strange year, as we all know, and that's no different for the legislature. Legislative committees are using Zoom to hold their meetings, so nobody's at the Capitol, nobody's at the state office building or the Senate building. Everything is happening remotely. You know, when there's good and bad to that, it's a little clunkier to move bills through the process, but it is getting more people access because they don't have to travel to the Capitol to testify. 2021 is a budget year, so the legislature and the governor will have to pass bills and enact bills that establish the state's budget for the 2022 and 23 biennium. That's the primary focus of this session. That's the number one thing that has to get accomplished. In terms of how that plays out with deadlines, the first deadline is March 12th, and that's for individual bills to pass all of the policy committees that they need to pass. The second deadline is March 19th, and that deadline is for those bills to pass through the committees they need to pass through in the other body. And then the third deadline is the big deadline. That's the real deadline that applies to omnibus budget bills that will establish the state's budget. And that one is April 9th. So that's when everybody will have to, well, they might agree, but the House and Senate will have to have their budget proposals put together by April 9th. And speaking of the budget, the February forecast, which is the budget forecast that the legislature and the governor used to establish the state budget, was updated just, I think, last week. My days are confused. But that February forecast showed for the upcoming biennium a $1.6 billion surplus. And what's really interesting about that is the previous November forecast projected a $1.3 billion deficit. So to go from anticipating a $1.3 billion deficit to now projecting a $1.6 billion surplus is a really wild swing. And as you can imagine, you know, a lot of the preparation and planning that the governor and legislators were doing sort of just flipped over on its head. You know, it's better to have a surplus than a deficit, of course, to work through, but it just sort of changed the landscape of what was ahead of legislators in putting together a budget. And the big change that we saw in that forecast is due to an improved U.S. economic outlook. That was also due to some federal actions that have emerged since November that were not incorporated into the earlier projections. Revenue forecasts, actual revenue that's coming in has been higher than what was projected. And state spending that was projected has actually come in a little bit lower. So that's how we arrived at that surplus. Specific to the council and the transportation budget and the governor's budget proposal, the governor is, when he put his budget together, considered the one-time transit dedicated federal relief received by the council. And so those federal funds that we received are going to be used to fill in the operating deficits that the council was contending with. As you might remember, the last budget that was put together in 2019 separated out general fund appropriations for Metro Mobility, which was a great accomplishment to have Metmo have its own line item in the budget instead of being grouped together with rail service. And in 2019, the projected deficit for the next 2 years was filled with one-time funding. And so if not for the federal funds that we received, we would have needed to go to the state legislature and ask them to fill that funding need for the next 2 years. Whereas now with the federal aid, we are able to cover those operating expenses, as well as some capital maintenance deficits that we were faced with. And the federal aid will also provide some funding for a transit security initiative that we're proposing at the legislature. And if we're authorized to do that, we can use federal funds to implement that as well. Another part of the governor's budget would authorize the council to issue regional transit capital bonds. You've probably heard about these. We go to the legislature and ask for authority to issue RTC bonds, we call them, every 2 years. And those bonds pay for fleet replacement for buses, for other transit facilities, and also for Metro Mobility vehicles. So those are very important funds that we receive so we can maintain our fleet and keep up with the replacement schedule. And the policy initiative I alluded to earlier would allow the council to establish an administrative citations program for fare evasion. And what this means is that the council would be authorized to set up a program where non-sworn personnel would be able to inspect fares and issue an administrative citation if they find that somebody doesn't have a paid fare. Currently, only police officers can do this kind of work because fare evasion is a criminal offense. It's a misdemeanor. So because it is a misdemeanor, the citation has to be issued by a sworn police officer, and it has to be adjudicated by the courts. So a prosecutor gets that citation and prosecutes it through the court system. What we found is that prosecutors haven't seen this as a great use of their time. It's not uncommon if it does go to a judge, that the judge will throw it out because a misdemeanor has up to a $180 fine attached to it, and that would go on a person's record, and that doesn't seem quite proportionate to the underlying conduct of not paying a $2 fare to ride transit. The other benefit that we see in this proposal and having civilian personnel do this kind of work is that it just puts more official Metro Transit present on the system to be eyes and ears, to answer questions people might have about navigating the transit system. So we think it's beneficial in that respect as well. Those are the major points I wanted to hit, but I wanted to leave more time for questions because I want to hear what's of interest to you and make the best use of your time and giving information that you're interested in. So I'm happy to take any questions about what I've talked about or other things happening at the legislature.
I just have one quick question, and then I will give the floor to the members of my committee. But as far as the non-sworn personnel, when would they be able to start that? And if they would, does that lessen the crime? Right now it's $180 fine if it's fare evasion. Does that put the crime in a like a misdemeanor level 5, meaning that it's a ticketable offense? If they pay it, then it's not on their record because it's going to affect their ability to rent a place to live. It's going to affect their ability to get a job. I mean, all those things. So does it effectively take that crime and move it to a lesser element?
Thank you, Lisa. So those are great questions. To your first question about when this would be implemented, what we are doing right now is asking the legislature for authority to establish this program because right now we aren't able to do that under current law. So if we get the authority granted to us by the legislature and it's signed by the governor, the next step would be for the council to develop the program, and we would want a lot of public input into what that would look like. So, it's nothing that would go into effect the day after the bill was passed. It would take some time to build the program. But to your second question about the criminal nature of the current system, and that's a great point that you raised about having this as a criminal offense creates a lot of secondary problems in terms of having, a criminal record because of not paying a fare and all the consequences that people find in those circumstances. If we're given this authority, the citation we would issue would not be a criminal offense. It would be an administrative ticket that would be handled internally by the council. So it wouldn't go through the court system. There would not be a court record for this. And what the fine would be determined through this public process and adopted by the council. I think it's pretty safe to say it would be nowhere near $180. But that's something that we would have the ability to do a public engagement process on and work out.
Thank you. Anybody on the committee have any questions?
This is Ken.
Yes, Ken.
So, Brooke, I'm wondering, I heard a rumor at a meeting earlier today that there has been a reduction in, and this is just a rumor, so I'll just preface it again by saying this is a rumor. But I heard that the chatter is that the feds have reduced funding to Metro Mobility. Is there anything you can share that you're aware of anything like that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am not aware of that rumor. Metro Mobility is funded through the state, through the general fund primarily. And with the hole that was left by having one-time funding in the last budget, we are able to backfill that because we did receive federal funds. But the governor's budget has a plan in place that will fully make sure that Metro Mobility is fully funded.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. This is Heidi. My question is, because you were giving fines to people, when it comes to the mask thing, have we talked about, or has anybody ever been caught, and then it's been a fine, and how is that working? Because they say in the next couple of years we're probably going to have to wear the mask, and I know people are wearing them on the bus a little bit more, but they're not always on the bus fully wearing them. They're sort of wearing them, but at least they have them on when they're getting on the bus. But has anybody been fined, or how does that look, in the legislators, or how are you taking care of that? Because I hear the announcements all the time, but I haven't heard anything on the news or the legislators talking about it. So I was just wondering if that's, if the governor's ever heard anything.
Sure. I would have to check in with Metro Transit from an operations perspective about how they're enforcing that. As you noted, we've had a mask requirement in place for, I guess it'll almost be coming up on a year now. In January, the federal Department of Transportation also required masks to be worn on transit. So that kind of gave us an opportunity to refresh that message that it's a federal requirement as well. I would have to check in with Metro Transit to see how that's being enforced, but I'm not aware of a criminal penalty with respect to mask wearing, but I don't want to say anything and have that be wrong, so I'll have to check in with Metro Transit on that.
I'm kind of going by what I hear on the bus when it advertises it. It sounds like you're going to get in trouble, and I don't know if you get a ticket or if you don't ride the bus. I'm just following what it says, so I didn't know because I haven't heard anybody being caught, yet. I just know when they're on the bus, they're not always properly wearing their masks, but at least they're getting on the bus with one.
Well, yes. Heidi, thank you for your comment. Thank you, Brooke, and I hope you can follow up with us or follow up with me, and I'll make sure it gets out to the committee. Thank you for everything, and I hope I'll make members' comment or chair's comment, which would be the vice chair's comment this month, would be that we bring you back as a standing part of our committee, at least through legislative session. If you're able to come back next month, we'd love to have you as well.
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. And with that, I would ask, is there any subcommittee reports?
Daryl, this is Andy. I do have a couple things I can clarify if people would like me to do that now, or I can wait till public comment, whichever.
Please go. I'll forgo my subcommittee reports for the Gold Line and the Rush Line for your report, Andy. Go ahead.
Just in response to a couple of questions I can answer. To Ken's question, no. The feds haven't done anything with a Metro Mobility budget. They obviously don't contribute much of anything there, so they wouldn't have much impact. I think if I were to speculate on where that rumor started, the recommendation did come out from the review panel that the governor put in place to suggest that Metro Mobility funding be separated from broader transit funding, but that was supported by the council, and Metro Mobility will still be funded in full. The only difference is that if we had an unanticipated bump in cost on the MetMo side, that wouldn't have a negative impact on other transit funding. So that separation does not hurt Metro Mobility, but it does potentially help Metro Transit service. That's the only thing I can think of that people might have misinterpreted to start that rumor.
Okay, thank you, Andy.
You bet. And then to Heidi's question on the mask mandate, I can speak to that too, just because Metro Mobility is subject to the same new federal order. That does not punish riders. That punishes transit organizations if we transport people without masks. So, people don't get a fine or a ticket, but transit agencies can be fined by the feds. What the obligation is to, if you have somebody who's refusing to wear a mask, who doesn't have a documented reasonable modification in place, that you need to remove them at the next available opportunity from the bus. And then also in the case of fixed route, if people are inhabiting transit stations without masks and an operator becomes aware of that, people need to be removed from transit stops and shelters for non-mask use, again, unless they have a reasonable modification in place. So it just shifts a formal responsibility to the MPO or the transit provider.
Thank you for that clarification, Andy. As most of you know on this committee, I like to ride the bus and paratransit, so I'm hoping to get out there more and more as the weather gets nice. So I look forward to that. Ken, are there any reports from the Blue Line? And then, okay, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so as you may be aware, the Blue Line Advisory Committee has been non-existent for the last year. And that's primarily because the alignment that was agreed to or was in process involved 11 miles of shared use with the BNS Railroad right away, and BNSF has chosen to not communicate with the state regarding that. So the decision was made to realign the Blue Line. So the committee restarted on Monday, March 1st. And our goal is to develop a community-supported realignment of the 11 miles of the track that was originally going to be shared with BNS Railroad. So basically, for that portion of the the Blue Line extension. We're starting from scratch, going into the community to try to develop some support with the community and realign on public streets where the Blue Line will now go. So that work is expected to take at least at minimum a year. So we're looking for an active year in kind of realigning and developing new stops along the Blue Line extension. That's what I've got.
Thank you, Ken, for that. And then moving right along, I will ask, unless anybody has a direct hot question, I will ask Chris Bates if there's.
I have one for Andy. It's important. How do
Hold
we
on a
make
minute.
it?
Well, hold on a minute, Heidi, and I'll try to get to you on your member
Okay.
comment. But I'm asking Chris Bates, are there any? Is there any thoughts or any subcommittee reports on the Green Line? And if I don't hear none, I will. I'll wait for you to unmute if you have to unmute. Chris Bates, are you still with us, or were you with us? If not, we'll get his report next month. And then moving right along to chair's report. Then I'll let you go on your members' comment right away, Heidi. But under the chair's report, there was a letter that came out, and this would be the vice chair rather, not the chair's report. There was a letter that came out from the chair, from the chair of the Met Council, Charlie Zella, and the ones that worked on the language relating to priority seating. I want to thank our committee for working on that, and I want to thank our commitment to have a subcommittee continuing working on that and following up. But to Chair Zella's point, I think it was really nice that he responded so quickly, and he responded so favorably in some of our suggestions that if we haven't seen that letter or heard about that letter, we can maybe have somebody read it next month. But otherwise, it did go out in the last couple of days. If nobody has any questions about that, I would move to member comment, and I know that Heidi has something she wants to say, but I would ask that she holds that in case any other members have something first, because I do know I promised Heidi I would give her an opportunity, but I want to hear from somebody else as well. Sorry about that, Ken, if that was too much.
Yeah, so Ms. Vice Chair, I would like to request that a copy of Chair Zelli's letter be sent to us in our next packet, as opposed to somebody reading it. I think that's a more appropriate way to go.
Yes. Did you not get the did you not get a copy of it? Because it got sent to me, and I assumed that everybody else seen it. But I'll make sure it goes out in the next packet.
Okay.
Daryl, it was sent out to everybody.
It was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, I didn't see any.
I can resend it.
Okay, appreciate it.
I know I got a separate copy of it from our committee chair, so that's why I didn't know if it went out in the packet or not. But yes, yes. So, and it looks like we'll be working with Metro Transit and some other folks, the 5 of us that signed up last month to work on that. We'll be working through that, and so watch for details coming down. And then Heidi, you can have the next minute or so, I guess, or 30. If you can do it in 30 seconds, I would like that too. But
Yeah.
no pressure.
How do we make a complaint if you call the headquarters of Metro Mobility and the person you made the report to doesn't take it seriously and it was kind of fishy about it or kind of funny. You know, the person that you make a complaint to, because everybody kind of was in COVID, and I don't know who's home and who's at the office. So who do we talk to if the head office is, you know, that main number, if they're not doing their job correctly, and it is something that needs to be talked about. So is Andy there to answer my question?
Yep, I'm here. If you call that 1111 number, myself and all of my reps have phones at home. So that 1111 number can be used to reach either me or any of my customer service reps.
Okay. And then the other thing is we need to start doing again is my apartment complex. This is very serious to tell you this. People like to be picked up in the back, but not everybody wants to be picked up in the back and they're not reading the notes. Why do we follow the rules that you tell us to do, but they don't follow? So I just wanted to tell you that. So, and I need to make a complaint about the head person. So I'll call that number and I'll leave you a voicemail so then you can call me, you know, to ask the right questions. Andy?
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Andy, for that. I
so
do
you
know that
guys
number.
know.
I do know that number does work because I do know I have had to use it over the last week or so to get a vehicle back. So I do know that people are answering downtown and they're pushing those comments back out to the providers when appropriate. So thank you both for that. Any other comments? Member comments?
Yeah, this is Carrie Sheldon. So if I'm correct, we're supposed the right protocol is to call the 1111 number for those complaints, because I do have somebody that a friend of mine has complaints.
Yep, all complaints should go through the 1111.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. And any other members have comments at this point? Seeing no other questions, or maybe I'll give it another 10 seconds for somebody to unmute.
We can have public comment.
Yes, good point. Thank you, Ken. Is there any public or members of the public that are still around that would like to make a comment at this point? Sorry about that.
I do have one thing, Daryl. Does the public know how to get on here to do it? Or, you know, do they have it on the website, or where do they go to be a part of it if they want to tell us something?
They can go directly to the Met Council, metcouncil.org website, and they can find out how to attend their meetings virtually, via the web or otherwise. Yes, they are open to the public and they are able to attend. So having said all that, and thank you all for sticking with me a little bit. Sorry I didn't have the current roster in front of me, and thank you, Ellison, for backing me up on that, and thank you, staff. But one thing I also wanted to say, I don't know if Guthrie Byer is still on the call, but he will be a added asset to our committee, as he will represent the office of EEOC, I believe, under the Met Council, and he will be able to give us reports as it relates to accessibility and some of those things as it relates to our committees. So I appreciate him being added to our committee as a staff person, and I'm excited to work with him. And having said that, I move to adjourn the 2021 meeting of February 3rd of the Taac committee, and I would like to move for adjournment of March 3rd. Sorry, March 3rd of 2021.
I second.